to episode 230 of the Daily Fantasy Edge, presented by Mack Weldon Menswear. My name is Adam Levitan. I, of course, am one of the analysts here at DraftKings. I am the father of the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry, and we are coming off of as expected week. As expected, Amari Cooper, as the highest owned wide receiver on the slate at 28%, was an utter disaster. As expected, Traquan's season is here. As expected, Saquon Barkley destroyed the Bucks. Zeke destroyed the Falcons. As expected, Kenny Golladay is in fact the truth. As expected, Lamar Jackson not only pushed for, but got the 100-yard bonus on DraftKings. And as expected, of course, the newly minted Bible narrative was a stone disaster. I want to start with the quarterback situation this past week because I don't think enough people realize how valuable a rushing quarterback is in fantasy football. I mean, once we know Lamar Jackson is starting and going to play almost all the snaps, he's just like a lock for 50 rushing yards. If you watched him at Louisville, or more importantly, if you watched him in the preseason, you just knew it. Like 50 rushing yards was going to be impossible for him not to get that. So like he comes preloaded with 5 DraftKings points. Then we start adding in the touchdown equity from his legs and the ceiling from his legs. Like he has a legit chance to break a big run, very likely to get a bootleg or quarterback sneak or read option in the red zone inside the 10-yard line, the 5-yard line. So a lot of touchdown equity there. And so even if he only throws 19 passes and completes 13 of them for 150 yards with no TDs, as he did against the Bengals Sunday, I mean, the floor is just massive. I remember using Tim Tebow in my season-long leagues in 2010 and 2011. I mean, dude was only running, and I say only, but only running 10 to 12 times a game, nowhere near 27, but he was averaging like a little bit over 5 yards a carry. Like, who cares if he could barely throw? Now, of course, I didn't think that Lamar Jackson would run anywhere near 27 times. I mean, that's just so wild. But I thought 10 to 15 was really likely. So yeah, really tough to win like that consistently, I think, in real life NFL. But in fantasy, Lamar's floor is just a dream, particularly at 4,700. One other play I got a lot of questions about was Theo Riddick. And honestly, I didn't really plan to play Theo Riddick. Actually thought Dion Lewis was a way better play for only 800 more. But it was an odd week for roster construction, something I talked about repeatedly last week because it was so thin at wide receiver below 5K. And yeah, I wrote about Traquan a bunch. We talked about him on the podcast and mentioned DJ Moore against the Lions cornerbacks not named Darius Slay. And those guys were interesting. But like if you played those guys in cash, in head-to-heads, like I know you feel super smart, but I'd like to play you every week, right? It was just, I think, a little thin. So it turned out that Riddick, basically a wide receiver in the running back spot, was the best of that sub 5K range, as the Lions lost Marvin Jones, Golden Tate traded, starting tight end Michael Roberts out, et cetera, et cetera. Tough to find 6 to 8 targets, a solid 6 to 8 targets for 4,000. So yeah, playing Riddick was the only way I could get to play Michael Thomas, DJ, and Saquon, which I felt like were musts. Last point quickly on last week's lineups was defense/special teams. I don't think I've spent more than 300 to 400 above stone minimum on defense in a long time, maybe even all season. I'm not really sure. I don't remember, but we've talked about why before and how the salary cap between the quote-unquote good defenses and the quote-unquote bad defenses is really wide, often as much as 2K. And meanwhile, at quarterback, the difference between like Dak Prescott and Cam Newton is only 1K. So it's just insane to spend up at defense in cash usually, especially when we can predict, the following things. And all these things are the things that clearly made the Saints a really good play, I thought, at 2,100. The best possible situation for a defense is operating in known passing situations. That's obviously created by having a really big lead, something the Saints were obviously, pretty likely to have here. Known passing situations allow the defense to focus on the pass rush, which leads to, sacks, strip sacks, scoop and scores, interceptions, pick sixes, the things that score fantasy points. So the Saints at home, where they're so good and actually have a pretty talented front, was pretty strong. And yeah, so the Eagles were likely to score 25 points or whatever. Like, who cares? The last thing I think about when picking a defense is points allowed. I know a lot of sharp people played Jacksonville too. Still a really talented defense. Haven't generated turnovers this season, which has made them look, I think, way worse than they actually are. But Big Ben, 1 p.m. Eastern road game. Still thought the likelihood of Carson Wentz 40-plus dropbacks in the Dome was a little bit of a better spot for Saints D. You know, you get things like people paying up all the time. I mean, the Cardinals were 17%. The Cardinals were my favorite defense to pay up for as well. I think they were 3,100. But I'm so much more confident in Cam Newton outscoring Dak Prescott than I am in Cardinals outscoring Saints, if that makes sense. I wanted to follow up quickly on a listener question I took last week from last week's solo pod from the other Peter Jennings, not CSUM88, but he asked, you know, how easy/hard it was to make 150K, to profit 150K playing NFL cash in a season. So one thing that gets glossed over a bit, which I was reminded of this past week, is when you're playing a lot of head-to-heads like I am, the weight on the higher stakes stuff is just like so heavy. For example, like this week I won 80% of my head-to-heads, right? Believe I played 217 of them on the main slate. You know, I usually play anywhere from 200 to 250 head-to-heads. You know, 80%, that's great. You know, hashtag how rich. Well, not so fast. I lost a 2K, a 2120. I lost a 530. I lost a 215. All to the same guy, by the way, but regardless. So yeah, like I won a ton of 109s and 215s, and I won a 1K and 10s and 20s, etc. But I barely profited because of how much weight was on that 2K. And so things like that are going to happen, right? It's just another reason why it's so hard to grind up to 150K profit in an NFL season. Like I've been running so pure in so many ways this season, like close decisions going my way, outcomes on the field going my way, injuries. By the way, we haven't even talked about this. I mean, normally there are many weeks during the year, at least a few, where like the lineup just gets crippled by injuries. You know, guy snaps his leg in the first quarter, or whatever. I don't think that's happened at all to me this year. Like I don't think I've lost anybody this year. Maybe Cooper Kupp when he blew out his knee. I don't remember if I had him, but either way, I mean, it's been great for me in terms of injuries. So that's just like running hot right there. But anyways, so I've been like running so pure, you know, winning 70% of my head-to-heads overall. So it's a massive number. But my ROI on the year is still only around like 27%. So like I said last week, I think 10 to 20% is a realistic range. And then you can go back and listen last week if you want to see how hard it is to get up to 150K at a 10 to 20% ROI. All right, now it is time to tell you guys about Mack Weldon menswear. You can get 20% off your first order. Go to mackweldon.com and enter code EDGE, capital E, capital D, capital G, capital E, at checkout. These guys wanted to sponsor the pod, so they sent me some of their gear. And let me tell you, as someone who takes his sweatpants and his t-shirts very seriously, this stuff is legit awesome. The sweats are not like the baggy homeless guy kind of ones. They are the kind that can pass for having some actual style. And as for someone like me whose loungewear, whose sleeping wear is the same as his going out wear, this is very important. And the t-shirt, there's really nothing better than a soft, deep V, max chest hair exposed t-shirt. So go to mackweldon.com, MACKWELDON, mackweldon.com, and use promo code EDGE at checkout for 20% off. If you don't like your first items, they'll refund you, no questions asked. Let's get to the four-man now, and I was able to squeeze out a narrow win again, getting some late points from Saints defense to nip Peter. Full-blown chest hair pressed against the dog fur, most expensive duck treats possible, dangling them to her. Just a great life on Sunday night. Can go to DK Playbook and read my cash lineup review if you're interested in that. I would note that all three of me, Peter, and Al did play Lamar Jackson. Al went to Dion. He did not go down to Theo Riddick, stayed at Dion Lewis, got down by playing Odell, and O'Shaughnessy, whereas I went Riddick, Michael Thomas, RSJ. Obviously really close, and that's the whole game. As for the listener, Just Max, he went off the board at quarterback with Marcus Mariota, which I thought was probably wrong, to be honest. Like a road division game, uneven offense, and then most importantly, you're not even saving that much, right? Like Marcus Mariota was 5,500, while Cam and Breeze and Wentz were only 500 to 800 more. That's just such a small amount to take on Mariota. And Just Max also had Dion Lewis and Corey Davis, so a ton of equity tied up in Tennessee. And maybe that was his thinking. I think in a four-man style, you don't necessarily have to take on that much risk with one team, particularly a team like the Titans. But anyways, he pivoted after that, which I thought was sharp. The Titans game was at 1 o'clock, and after that, he knew he was in big trouble. And I think he pretty clearly pivoted after that. Did get on Traquan Smith, which was nice. Made a nice pivot, I believe, to Jared Cook, Alshon Jeffrey. That was super sharp. At least it gave him a chance because all those guys were guys he knew that me and Peter and Al wouldn't have, and they did have some pretty good upside, actually. But obviously, anytime you're pivoting to something suboptimal because of a bad 1 p.m., you're going to be in trouble. So anyways, the updated four-man standings, myself 5 wins, Al 3, listeners 2, Peter, of course, with 1. The Week 11 Listener League was 8,000 people, and it filled a couple hours before lock. As promised, the guys at DraftKings did make the Week 12 Listener League bigger. Hashtag make it bigger. But only in troll fashion as they went up to 8,100. And I actually talked to them about this. I actually thought it was the right decision to only go up to 8,100. And because while the Thanksgiving slate is super popular on DraftKings, everybody loves to play the Thanksgiving slate, the Sunday after, I suspect, is one of their lightest days of the year in terms of action. People are distracted, they're out of their normal routine, they have family, etc. So as long as the 8,100 fills on this Sunday on a kind of week slate, a week main slate, I will be shooting for 9 or 10,000 in week 13. So hashtag make it bigger. What I do know is if we can't fill the 8,100, we're not getting to 9 or 10K. So here's how you get in. It is, of course, the unquestioned best tournament on DraftKings. It is rake-free, flat, optimal payout structure, $5 buy-in, 3-entry max. Go to DK Playbook, find the logo for this here podcast. Click on the link, and you'll see a link. It'll say enter the Week 12 Listener League here. Click on that. Get on it. The Week 11 Listener League was won by Big Ball Boi. Cam Newton at 8%, DJ Moore at 7%, bring it back with Golladay in that same game at 21%. One of the best mini game stacks you could have had on this slate. And then he went jam him in at running back. Saquon 41%, Zeke 25%, David Johnson 40%. Got some exposure to Traquan the GOAT, obviously 14%, I guess it doesn't surprise me that much that Traquan was 14% in our listener league here because obviously we've talked about him so much. It did surprise me a little bit that Traquan was 9% in the slant and tournaments like that on DraftKings because he was coming off a 0 target game. It just shows how much sharper people in general are getting, I think. In the past 2 or 3 years ago, if a guy was coming off of a 0 target game, he'd be 1% owned for sure. So for sure, people are getting smarter, and I think those are examples of that. Traquan, obviously the GOAT. Big Ball Boi also was on Giants D. Can't believe they were only 5%. Think about how many times Ryan Fitzpatrick, this is the most pass-heavy team in the league, the most turnover-prone team in the league. Think about how many times Ryan Fitzpatrick was going to drop back. Giants D was for sure an awesome play. I believe they were 2,400. In second place was G-Unit 6Gs 1983. This is actually a friend of the show, Alec Garnett. I believe he's an elected official, he's in the Colorado House of Representatives or something like that. Obviously, he knows Peter because Peter knows everyone. Also, by the way, his screen name on DK is so funny. A lot of you guys probably don't even know what it refers to, but I was born in 82, and it looks like Alec was born in 83. When we were in college, 50 Cent was the biggest thing going. I really wasn't into it, but everyone loved 50 Cent, and his crew was the G Unit. But anyways, Alec got second place in this. He went naked Lamar, obviously the right choice. We had major concerns about Lamar's ability to throw the football. Saquon and Zeke, and then played Jordan Reed at 5%. And man, I mean, I think I didn't have the 900 in my lineup, but maybe making Jordan Reed a priority over RSJ would have been better. I mean, I don't know. Jordan Reed's been so underutilized this year in the way he's been used and in the red zone. Colt McCoy, if Alex Smith plays that whole game, maybe Jordan Reed does nothing. Colt McCoy certainly had his eyes locked on Jordan Reed, but yards per route run is a metric that I really like to look at. I think it's one of the most predictive metrics, and Ricky Seals-Jones' yards per route run this year is just like pathetic. I mean, as bad as Jordan Reed's been, his was so much better than Ricky Seals-Jones. Anyways, Alec also was on Traquan, obviously. T.Y. Hilton, 22%. Talked about him in leverage. Talked about him on the podcast. Awesome play for sure. Kerryon Johnson, 6.5%. I would have had a bigger game if he didn't get hurt. Kerryon's just good at the game. Texans defense was 13%. That surprised me a little bit because of how conservative Alex Smith is. Like, I usually don't like to use defenses against Alex Smith because he turns the ball over so infrequently, but certainly paid off as Alex Smith was just a disaster before getting hurt. Congrats again to Alex, second place finish. In third place was Masterm13. He played off the board with his stack. Josh Rosen, 2%, and Larry Fitzgerald, 3%. No David Johnson in that stack. Obviously, you guys know me. I wasn't about to play Larry Fitzgerald, but, if you think defense matters, then Rosen to Fitz made sense. Traquan and DJ Moore, the rookie wideouts that were the nuts, and T.Y. Hilton. I mean, Larry Fitz, Traquan. I'm sorry, Larry Fitz, Traquan, DJ Moore, and T.Y. Hilton. Pretty much the optimal wide receiver quartet right there. So congrats to Master. But anyways, we will see big ball bookie in the week 12 format. Okay, now it is time for everyone's favorite portion of the program. Producer Luke, hit the theme music. Going to do a 10-pack of questions today. Thanks as always to everyone for the excellent questions. Question 1 comes from Crunchy Peanut Butter. He says, Adam, can you talk through your physical setup and rituals during main slate Sundays? Are you on hashtag Team Watch the Games, or are you mostly refreshing DK and Twitter? Yeah, it's not that exciting, really. So I usually get to my desk at WeWork around 6:45 a.m. Eastern. Obviously, can't work from home on Sundays because my two little munchkies will want to play with me. So I start when I get there by going through all the news from the day/night before, getting that posted up, doing an ownership projection update for labs. The ownership projections at that point are usually pretty final unless there's some truly questionable guys. I usually then look through the lobby on DK to try to find some good games. Repost some head-to-heads if I need to. If a certain buy-in level, all my games were taken, I'll repost those. One thing to note, I think, is a lot of the best players aren't usually awake yet at 6:30, 7 in the morning. So I can usually get some good 3-mans and some good 10-mans. Finalize my player pool for cash, finalize my main lineup, work on 1 p.m. only and 4 p.m. only if I'm playing those. The whole time I'm just glued to Twitter, pregame shows to see if there's anything else there that we can use, looking at player props, see if there's any of those that I want to bet. And then if there's any time left over, or if my main lineups for each slate are completely set, I might make some lineups for the lotteries, aka the GPPs. Then I get the inactives and get those in, keep registering for games that I think are good, all the way up to lock. I'm registering for games. And as for when the games actually start, I have 2 computer screens up at the desk. One, I actually like to watch the written descriptions of the play-by-play. Like, you can see them all at once. You don't have to move the screen. You can literally see all the descriptions of each play at once. I actually love it. Like it says Doug Martin rushes up the middle for 3 yards. And then on the other screen, I have Red Zone up with the sound on. And, that's about it. Nothing special. Once the early games are over, I usually go get some food, usually a nice little linguine with clams and pasta fagioli from my favorite Italian place. Get it to go, obviously, come back and watch the 4 o'clocks. I know you mentioned Twitter. I try to stay off of Twitter mostly while the games are going on, right? It's just like, people tilting their faces off and, drawing massive conclusions from tiny samples, and people being ridiculously results oriented, hindsight oriented, like, oh, I knew I was gonna play Traquan. Like, I had Traquan in my lineup until 30 minutes before lock. I don't see much value in really looking through that stuff. So I'll usually be watching like one or two of my contests closely, whatever the highest stake stuff that I'm in. And yeah, I mean, pretty standard, I think. Nothing too special. Question 2 comes from Dick Grote. He says, I know you hate Thanksgiving, but is this in any way acceptable? I used to work with a guy who would bring one steak to his in-laws, cook it on their grill, and then eat it with the sides they provided. Thoughts, please. See, so to me, this is acceptable, right? I mean, it makes perfect sense. Why should anyone care what you eat? But I know that we're living in a society here, and this kind of behavior is going to be seen as insulting and weird and unacceptable. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times I wish I just had the balls to do like exactly what I want. A lot of times I can't, I just have too much guilt. I actually envy people, like I know this guy, he's been with this girl for like 1.5 years or something. I don't know. And it's July 4th weekend, and, she's begging him to go to like her family's party, her parents' house a couple hours away. It's like a family event. Like, he's got to go, right? I mean, they've been together 1.5 years, and he's just like, no, not happening. Don't want to. And she's crying, and he stays strong, and he's like, no, I don't want to. I'm not doing it. And I mean, I could just never do that, right? Like, even though, of course, I don't want to, I just feel too bad, and like I would want to do the quote unquote right thing. So the same thing with bringing a steak to Thanksgiving. Like, for me, I can't do it. I'd rather just get my shrimp lo mein on the way to Thanksgiving, and have no one know and leave it at that. Question 3 comes from friend of the show, Trevor Savage. He says, could the best WNBA player beat the worst NBA player one-on-one to 15 with ones and twos? Make it, take it, coin flip for first possession. First of all, Trevor is the man. Used to play poker with Trevor a lot. Check out his vlog on YouTube. He's out there killing it. As for the question, I'm actually really, really qualified to answer this. I'm quite certain I've watched more WNBA than anyone listening to this for sure. And honestly, there might be fewer than like 500 people on Earth who follow WNBA closer than me, to be honest. I love it. But anyways, so for sure, the best player in the WNBA right now is this woman named Breanna Stewart. It's not even close. She's awesome. The problem is she's like 6'4", 170, which is very big in the WNBA. And she's really athletic for her height. Like, she's an awesome rebounder, but also one of the league's best perimeter shooters. The problem is that like at that size, I'm not sure her game is suited for one-on-one, right? She's not really an off the dribble player, particularly against someone athletic enough to be in the NBA. So like one-on-one is a different skill set. So like the best one-on-one player in the WNBA is probably Diana Taurasi. Like, she's a bit old now, but maybe you could make a case for Skylar Diggins as the best one-on-one player. The problem is like Taurasi's only 6 feet flat and Diggins is like 5'9", 145. It's just so hard to get your shot off against an NBA caliber defender at that size when you're definitely overmatched athletically, from quickness, etc. So yeah, I don't think it's maybe as absurd as people think, but I'd give it like a 1% chance of happening. Even the worst player in the WNBA, I don't know, like Matthew Dellavedova or Evan Turner or Carmelo Anthony or something like that. They're just ridiculous from a size/athleticism perspective. It's so hard to overcome. Question 4 is from Quailman. He says, do you go about game selection any different for small slates like the one coming up on Thursday? Yeah, so 3-game slate Thursday. I'll be playing smaller for sure. Like, I think the edges are just smaller as the size of a slate gets smaller, just because there are fewer decisions, right? Like, it's just harder for people to mess up on these small slates. Now, with that said, the action is so absurd on Thanksgiving because it's great. I mean, everyone wants to play, and with good reason. You set your lineup, you watch football. Every play means a ton. Every play is on TV. So I think you extend your game selection a bit, particularly at lower stakes, because there's so much action. But yeah, I don't know. I'll mostly be doing the same things. I probably won't post quite as big. Question 5 comes from Donald Francis. If you could use one word to describe Black Friday shoppers, what would it be? Just donkeys, just total donkeys. God invented the internet so we don't have to go shopping in real life. Actually, I take that back. I prefer to go shopping in real life for like clothes and whatnot. I like to see them. I like to try them on, but certainly not on Black Friday, right? Like you have to be an insane person to deal with all the crowds and everything out there. But yeah, most of the shopping I think can be done online now, right? Like toys and gifts. I don't know why you would do that in real life. Online, it's just the stones. Question 7 comes from Andy Steinberg. He says, you've been pretty hot this year. Anything different in regards to strategy you're doing this year versus other years? Does your way of thinking week to week change slightly when you're running hot like that? Yeah, confidence is a big part of a lot of things in life. I think a way bigger part than people realize. Like, I don't really believe in hot streaks with baseball hitters or, shooters in NBA, etc. But I do believe that when things are going well, people can execute more optimally, and that often gets masked as a hot streak, right? Like, they can make decisions clearer. They can trust what they know instead of second guessing, just swing the bat, just shoot the basketball, don't think about it. And then it looks like a hot streak. They're more willing to stick with their convictions when things are going well, when they have confidence. Like confidence is so important. A really good example, I think, is in poker. Like most competent players can play really well, like towards the 80th or better percentile plus of their capabilities when they're winning, right? But so many guys, so many players are a disaster when they're stuck during a session, myself included. Like when I'm losing, I'm just a mess. It's a really big league. So like playing my C or D game when I'm losing is maybe or a lot to do with a lack of confidence. But I knew that when I was playing a lot of poker, I knew that I'd try to play long sessions when I was winning and short sessions when I was losing. I think that's, pretty GTO standard. But anyways, I don't think my strategy is too different at all this year. I've been playing bigger than usual, just feeling confident. And I really think that's really it, being confident in things that you're doing in life is hard because it's easy to say, I'm going to be confident today and everything's going to work out. You need results, I think, to gain confidence. It's stupid. All these motivational speakers, you can do it. You're confident, that's not going to do it. I think you need to see results first and then you gain confidence and then it starts to turn into a hot streak or whatever. I think that's how it goes. Question 8 comes from Ben Donovan. He says, what is your favorite part of the week during the NFL season? Taping the Edge pod right after the main slate is done, etc., etc. Honestly, I love doing the solo pod. I love doing this one. This is kind of the stuff that I like to talk about. Talking about the games and the players and the salaries and stuff like that is cool. It's awesome, but I'm way more interested in strategy of all kinds, really, strategy for games like DFS and life. So I do like the time right after lock, getting to see who other people played and then seeing how this week's process played out or whatever without any real responsibilities. When the games are going on, I'm checking for some late swaps, but really I'm mostly just kind of evaluating the games. All right. That is going to do it for another edition of the Solo Pod. There are 2 more podcasts coming this week. The next pod will be a 3-man Thanksgiving special coming out Wednesday afternoonish, focused on the Thanksgiving slate. And then later, after that, will be a first look at Sunday's main slate, also with Alan Pete. So go ahead and get in the Listener League. I know it was a troll job by getting only up to 8,100. It is what it is. I think it will be much bigger if we fill the 8,100 in week 13. So for producer Luke, for Jerry, I am Adam. Have a great bird carcass day. Good luck, everybody. We are promoters at DraftKings and also avid fans. Our usernames are Adam Levitan, Al Smizzle, and CSU Ram 88. We may sometimes play on our personal accounts in the games that we offer advice on. Although we have expressed our personal view on the games and strategies in this podcast, they do not necessarily reflect the views of DraftKings, and we also may deploy different players and strategies than what we recommended in this podcast.